Welcome to Healing for the Soul podcast, with this being season number 4, episode number 20. I am your host, Robin Stoltman, and today I have my guest, Brady Mack, who is a nervous system specialist and host of the Blissful Movement podcast. On the show, we are talking today about trauma-informed clinical breathwork. And before we get started, remember, every week I feature different guests to help you become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or thought of. So let's get started. Thank you so much, Brady, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Robin, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, what is your specialty and who do you like to work with?
Thank you. And so I work with the nervous system, but really what I do is I work with your breath. And so I work with all kinds of different people, particularly people who have experienced trauma in their life. And so it might be a big impactful trauma, or it might be a smaller trauma that has, accumulated over time, say an ongoing stressor in their life, or even, as far as a heartbreak, or someone telling you you're not a great singer can really be a form of trauma if we hold that within our nervous system. Yeah. And so what we do is we actually take a look at the way that people are breathing, and we find that the way that they're breathing is the way that their nervous system's operating, which controls every other function of their brain and their body. And so when you change the way you breathe, you actually change the way that you think, and you feel, and you actually behave in life. What we are able to do in the system of breathwork that I teach is take people through the system of neuroplasticity, which means a repatterning of the nervous system, or a repatterning of their breath. And so we take people who, might experience anxiety, stress, poor sleep, poor relationships, whatever it is that's happening in life, we can actually repattern that through repatterning their breath on a subconscious level.
That is awesome. I like that. So just for our listeners or our people that are watching us, what's the best way to contact you with a time zone if they're just tuning in?
So best way to contact me would be through Instagram. It's feel.health on Instagram. And we have a clinic set up here in Vancouver, PST. We are taking online appointments. We've got retreats. We've got programs out all the time. So certainly everything that we offer is available through our Instagram page, and that'd be the best place to reach us.
Awesome. So who or what inspired you to do the work that you do, especially with this trauma-informed clinical breathwork?
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in somewhat of a dysfunctional family, and I think everyone does to some extent, right? Everyone can,
Yes,
some way, shape, or form relate to some form of dysfunction in their family. And I left home at a pretty early age, at about 18, to try to find a place that felt safe, find a sense of home. And I traveled the world looking for places like Australia, New Zealand, and Bali. And what I found through my yogic practice was that that sense of home wasn't anywhere else in the world where I was looking. It was actually here all along. And I'm, pointing to my heart here. And coming home and into my body and feeling safe in my body wasn't an outside experience. It was an inside job. And so when I had that coming home, that feeling of safety in my heart, in my body, I experienced this extreme feeling of what I like to call bliss. And it was, feeling all of the emotions all at once. I was laughing, I was crying. There's a big somatic release that I experienced. And I thought, I don't know what this is, but this is worth living. This is gold. I want to bottle this up, and I want to share this with the world. And so I started a podcast. I started traveling, and I became a yoga teacher. And the whole thing was just finding moments of bliss and finding out what moves you a little bit closer to a bliss-filled lifestyle. And more often than not, what I found was that the nervous system controls every other function of our brain and body. And so when we can tap into that, we can actually start to experience more of these moments of safety and bliss and coming home to our body. Now, really intimately connected to the nervous system is our breath. And so, as a yoga teacher, I was practicing a little bit of breath work, but I had really wanted to dive a bit deeper. And I met my teacher, Edward Dangerfield, who became a guru to me. And I studied and lived with him in Bali for some time. And what he taught me was that the nervous system controls everything, right? And
Mhm.
the way that we're breathing is connected to that nervous system, and there's actually a way that we can repattern that so that we can experience these moments of bliss more commonly. And now Ed is a yogi. He's a great yogi, but he's also really grounded in the Western neuroscience, and he's set up a clinic to actually take people through this system of repatterning their breath. And I love this so much. I learned everything I could, and then I took it home here to Canada and set it up in North America, in the Western world, and have since opened my clinic here and just continue to share that with as many people as I can.
That is amazing. I really I think about that, like, that's that's really amazing how you were able to latch onto it and then be able to share it. Like, do it, like, everything that you could just so that you could take and share this with the rest of the world. Because there's
Yeah,
so many different types of breath work out there. I know I'd asked you a couple questions, like, before we started, and I'm like, I don't understand, like, all of the different types of breath work, but it's like, is there a science of breath work in what it does?
totally. Yeah, and so there's a few different things that we actually look at when we're examining the breath and the way that we operate as humans. One of those things would be the inhale versus the exhale. So our inhale is representative of our effort, right? So when we take a big inhale, or any inhale for that matter, our heart rate speeds up. So autonomic arousal, which is a branch of the nervous system, speeds up. On our exhale, everything slows down. Right, and we can feel that somatically
Yeah.
within our bodies when we just breathe. Now, what happens as a form of patterning based upon past lived experiences or traumatic events is some people might get stuck in a particular pattern, right? So an example of that might be, we see this in type A personalities and overachievers. Their inhale might be effort, and their exhale might also be effort. And so that's representative
Oh,
of a lot of control in their life. And it actually, on the surface in the Western world, it might seem like, these people are really getting far. They're putting a lot of effort out. But effort, when it meets effort without rest, inevitably leads to burnout, right? And
yeah.
so we can see that these people will also crash really hard. The adverse of that, we might see people who are all exhale. They're actually not taking full deep breaths to energize them, and that might show up as lethargy or laziness as well. And so we can take a look at the quality of the inhale versus the exhale. Another piece to that is we can actually look at where the breath lands in the body. And so when we take a look at people, we lie them down on our massage tables, and we actually examine where they're breathing into. And we have certain diaphragms within the body. And really, what can be impactful is understanding what these different diaphragms do. And so, if we have the ability to breathe deep down, and I don't mean, like, a lot of people, when I say take a deep breath, they think, that's not
Yeah,
actually a deep
I hear
breath.
it
That's,
all the
that's
time.
just a short and sharp breath. But I mean actually deep. So dropping the bottom diaphragm that sits just below your rib cage down towards your hips. And when I do that, a few things are happening. One is that I'm making more space for the lungs. So I'm actually, making more depth for the lungs. But the other piece is, as I drop that bottom diaphragm, I'm starting to massage all of my internal organs. It's like an internal massage. And so my liver, my gallbladder, my spleen, my kidneys, my adrenals, my intestines, all of this is being massaged, stimulating blood flow, stimulating neuronal activity. So this is really healthy for the body, right? We know massage feels good, and an internal massage feels even better, especially when we start to stimulate all of these organs in our digestive tract. So we can look at, almost any chronic disease, and we can trace it back to the way that people are breathing. An example that might be like IBS, is irritable bowel syndrome. If people have problem with digestion, it might just be because they're not having that internal massage happening. And so we can actually repattern that. And what we see is that by repatterning the breath, we're now getting that internal massage every breath that we take throughout the day, which is, we take 20,000 breaths per day, Robin.
That's a
So,
lot.
so there's a lot of opportunity for this really nourishing activity to happen within the breath. And we can even press further than that. We can press further down than just massaging these organs. We can press all the way down through our pelvic floor, and all of that drops all the way down as far as the perineum. The perineum is that space that sits just below the anus and the testes on a man, a little bit different for women. And on a full in-breath, you can actually feel all of that drop down, and on the exhale, it'll lift back up, which is just incredible to think like how much more space we have available to really breathing deeply. And if we can do that on a subconscious basis, 20,000 times per day, I mean, we can have really dramatic impacts on the way that we live our life and the way that we think, feel, and behave.
That is awesome. Because I had said before we started too, that I did like the 13 breaths to freedom technique. And that's exactly what it uses, is it goes all the way, you take your breath obviously in through your mouth, but then you bring it all the way down your forehead, and you just imagine your breath going all the way down to the perineum and all the way back up, like through that whole loop cycle. And when I've done it, it's kind of hard to do at first, like to imagine that, because it's like you think you got all your breath, and then you're taking even more, and then you're just like, really, I can only do it like 5 times, and then I'm just like, okay, I can't do that. But to do that for 20,000 breaths, that would be, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that even possible?
Yeah, it totally is. And, oftentimes we think, this is like, it feels really hard. You're like, I can't think about breathing down there 20,000 times per day. And that's actually not fair of me to ask anyone to do, and certainly not, while you're sleeping. So what, as babies, we're typically born with this full breath. We have the ability to breathe all the way down, and it's really soft and really, really available, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we go through life, things start to change. We go through lived experiences, potential traumatic events, and that actually has an effect on our psychology, but it also, and probably more impactfully, has an effect on our nervous system. And so the nervous system is this electricity of the body. And when we can tap into that, we can find out that based upon its past lived experiences, it stores this information, right? The mind is present in every single cell of the body. And so when it lives through certain experiences, it changes the way it operates. Same as we do. When we get new information, we might change the way that we think, feel, and behave. The body does the same thing. And so, based upon a time in our life where maybe we didn't feel safe, we will actually stop breathing down into the depths of our body for really good reason, because at that point, it might make more sense for us to be really active. We might not want to have this, really calm, relaxed breath down into the belly. We actually want to be active and able to fight, flight, or freeze in that state. And so our breath shifts. Now that's okay. That's a really intelligent response from our body to change and to adapt to its environment.
Yeah.
What isn't healthy is when we stay in that state, right? We don't have an opportunity to, again, let ourselves know, or let the body know, that we're safe and that we can actually come back to that full deep breath. And so this really takes a system of neuroplasticity, which is a rewiring of our nervous system to in the same way that our body thought it had to be active, to enforce the idea that it can now be safe.
That's awesome. I'm just thinking, like, a lot of my issues, because this is what I've been doing a lot of self-work on lately. I realize like all of my issues come down to safety.
Mhm.
Like even the vehicle that I drive, I got it because of safety.
Mm.
Like everything I do is safety related. So when you're talking about the trauma part of it, it definitely resonates with me as far as like that need for the safety and why the body would just want to not take in that full breath at those moments because it does need that fight or flight response at that time.
Mhm.
That's really interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, and safety is really intelligent. It's like a really great place to be. There's a lot of, if you search the internet and
Mhm.
you talk about safety, a lot of there are comfort even. A lot of what you'll see is like there's no growth in comfort, and
No.
it's just not true at all because most of our growth as humans happens in the most comfortable place ever. It happens in the womb, right? We go from
True.
being just a little sperm cell to this whole, like, we develop, I don't even know how many, like 100,000 times our size. And it happens, this growth stage happens in utero, right? Floating in amniotic fluid without temperature to worry about, without gravity to worry about, without breath
True.
or impact to worry about. We're really, really safe. And so that's a really great thing. And the key is to know what actually sets you up for safety. So having an awareness around your environment and what keeps you safe, right, is a really, really important piece, because our environment is informing us much more than we give credit to, right? We're
Yes,
sensory
all the time.
beings as humans. We're 80% of our nervous system is sensing. Only 20% is going from the brain back down to the body. So we're always taking in our environment. And if we, look at even a student in school, we like to think, we're learning from the textbook or what we're reading, but really much more than that, what we're being informed by is the desk that we're sitting at, or the classroom that we're in, or the people that are around us, or what we're, how we're playing at recess. Like that really has a greater impact than we give credit for, on the way that we see the world.
I'm glad you said that because I, I was thinking about it for my own self, like with my office here. I'm like, I can, like, my phone calls, like when I'm calling places, I have to be in a different area. I cannot be where I'm sitting right now. I have to go in a different area just to make those phone calls, but I never stopped and thought about it. That's because, like, when I was at school, I had to be more focused because in school I would get so bored because I already knew a lot of the information, so I would get bored and teachers wouldn't think I was listening. But it's like that makes sense why I have to physically leave where I'm sitting now just to go to a different area because then I'm more okay. Now I can focus better, but I never stopped and thought about that's why I have to do it. So when you mentioned about the different areas in the environment, it's not just the outer world, it's really how our internal world is.
Totally. Yeah, and like so much so to, like, even, sitting during a phone call, like that is the chair is informing you, right? And especially if it's like one of those chairs that kind of makes you like hunch over, or you're like on your
Yes.
laptop and your shoulders are rolled forward, that impacts the way that we feel, right? And there's this biofeedback that's constantly happening, sending information from the body up to the brain. And so we can pay attention to that. And similar to, like, when you see a dog with its tail
Mhm.
between its legs, like, the
Yeah.
feeling that it's experiencing. Well, oftentimes with like chairs or technology, it's putting us in these contracted, hunched over states.
Yeah.
And that is informing the way that we interact with the world. It's putting a filter on us. And so, because so much of the world is contracting, in the modern world, what can be really impactful is to really open ourselves up, right? As we start to open ourselves up, we know that, Amy Cuddy is a great, I think she's a Harvard professor. She's got like the second most viewed TED talk of all time, and she talks about, like, the power posture. She says, like, fake it till you make it. Just
Yes.
make yourself big. And they've actually done studies to find out that there's been a 20% increase in testosterone for just doing power posture for 2 minutes. Now, at the same
Wow.
time, your cortisol drops. So cortisol is like the stress hormone, by about 20%. And so you can see this really impactful difference in your neurochemistry just from changing the way that you're standing or you're holding yourself, right? At the same time, we know that it changes the way that we breathe. If we're hunched over and protecting our heart, which can, be something that we see from technology, or we can even see it from, after someone's experienced a heartbreak, we see people's shoulders roll forward and protect this vital
I used
place,
to
the
do that
heart.
a lot after trauma. After
Totally.
the trauma that I experienced, I used to take and like be hunched all the time. But then as I've worked on it, I'm like, now I'm more okay, now I'm more open, I'm now like I'm not like what I used to. That's one of the biggest things. I'm like, you can always tell if somebody's confident. You can tell a quick difference between people who are confident and those who aren't. The confident ones always have the shoulders back and they're more how they carry themselves, like what you said, versus the
Hmm.
other people.
And I just think that so much emphasis goes on like the way that we think about it, right? It's like the way that
Right.
we feel if we're confident or not. But I think there's a conversation that's being missed, and that's the reverse engineering of that. And so there's
Okay.
the idea that we can believe or repeat or use affirmations or mantras to say, I am confident, I am confident, I am confident. Or we can actually just be in the posture of confidence and see how that
Yes.
affects the brain, right? And there's really call it a hack, or just call it the way that we operate is like there's a bottom up approach. A lot of therapies and such are like a top down. It's like,
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy would be like using the mind to try to change our behavior. When we use the body to actually change the mind, we're using a bottom up approach. And so that's adapting our environment and our body and noticing the way that we feel as a result.
That's awesome. I love this a lot. So, like, what's the magic of like the breath work, especially like the trauma informed clinical breath work that you do?
Yeah, it certainly feels like magic for most people that experience it, but there's a real science to it, right? And so we take a look at the quality of the breath, the location of the breath. We'll also look at, what is the rhythm and the timing of the breath. Some people have quite a quick breath, and that might show up as anxiety or overthinking. Some people have like an absence of breath. They'll be holding their breath and have maybe like a fear-based response. If you find yourself holding your breath, it could be that. And so what we do is we take a look at the way that people are breathing and the effect that has on their psychology, right? So this real bottom-up approach. And then the real magic that you talk about, Robin, is when we are able to reprogram that on a subconscious level. So again, you're breathing 20,000 times per day. Every single one of those breaths sends a signal up to the brain to relay information. And I can't ask you to change the way that you breathe all day long 20,000 times per day. But what I can do is I can take you through this system, this process of neuroplastically repatterning your breath. And now we can reinforce a new pattern, maybe a pattern of safety or of confidence. And we can have that ingrained in the body. And now this new pattern is being reinforced 20,000 times per day, including while you're sleeping. And then it's done. And so that's the real power of the specific style of breathwork that I teach.
That is amazing because I'm like thinking, well, maybe that would help me get rid of the sleep apnea. That's what my face is always red because I'm allergic to the materials in the mask.
Totally. And you know what? I can help you get rid of sleep apnea right now. It's really, really
Really?
simple. Yeah. And it's just transitioning from mouth breathing to nose breathing. And so
Yeah,
oftentimes,
I do it when I sleep. The mouth breathing.
yeah, and it's horrible. Yeah, it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense because our mouth is a bigger hole, so we are obviously able to take in much more
Yeah.
oxygen, but we don't necessarily need to be, right? And so
No.
the times that we're breathing through our mouth are like times of absolute activation. If our life is being threatened, if we're, I don't know, wrestling a bear or something, we would want to be mouth breathing. The rest of life, almost entirely, we can be breathing through the nose. And so we actually have to train ourselves to breathe back through the nose. Especially, you can imagine reading a book or something that's like
Mhm.
really relaxing. You wouldn't want to be breathing through the
No.
mouth, right? You'd actually want to have like a much more relaxed response. And so the practice becomes, how can I make my internal state match my external environment? And when you're sleeping, if you're breathing through your nose, you're signaling to the body that I'm in a much more relaxed state. Now, at the same time, you're starting to release more nitrous oxide in the body. You're stopping the release of vasopressin, which is a hormone in the brain from the pituitary that makes you feel like you actually have to pee. And so if you find yourself getting up during the night to pee, just switching to nose breathing can be a really easy solution for that. At the same time, we're getting much better at metabolizing oxygen. So if we're using less oxygen breathing through the nose, then we will actually get better at using it, which is interesting. So less is kind of more here with the breath in terms of like sleep and most of life. So of course you're going to be sleeping, and so it might be difficult to start to breathe through the nose when you're not conscious of this. One thing that you can do is actually mouth tape. And so there's like mouth tape strips out there that you can buy that actually just keep your mouth closed while you're sleeping. I don't necessarily think that you need the mouth tape strips. What I've found works well is just a piece of medical tape, and then you can put like a little bit of coconut oil on the lips to make sure it's not like, ripping off any skin when you do peel it off. We don't want to like duct tape anyone's mouth, because that wouldn't be very comfortable, but we just want it enough to keep the mouth closed, and so that the muscles know that it doesn't necessarily need to use the mouth to breathe there. The
Wow.
other thing that's a little bit, more of a work, is less of like a band-aid solution, but more of like a whole retraining is to work out or to train, or to walk even, and practice breathing through the nose as opposed to breathing through the mouth, even when you're really gasping for air. Now, this will be the hardest training that you ever do, because your
Yeah.
body will be starving for oxygen, but that's a really good thing, because you're starting to train your body to be better at using oxygen while, moistening the breath, creating nitrous oxide, and a whole gambit of effects that happen when you start to breathe through the nose. So for anyone out there that is, listening to this podcast and not needing to exert a tremendous amount of energy, transition to nose breathing right now and just practice that throughout the day.
I'm glad that you said that, especially because I'm thinking about like my sleep apnea, but then I'm also thinking of my traumas, like for why I would have why I would have my mouth open at night isn't just because I talk in my sleep, but it's also I'm thinking about like most of my trauma happened at night when I was asleep.
Hmm.
So that would make sense why my body's like, okay, we need to breathe through the mouth instead, because just in case something happens, to be more alert.
Yeah, absolutely. You're
That
you're
makes
so onto it.
100% sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. So the retraining can be an impactful process for you, is to know that you are safe while you're sleeping, right? And
Mhm.
a safe breath would feel like a slower, deeper, fuller breath in through the nose, and you can even practice that right now, right?
Mhm.
And you can just notice how your whole energy changes.
Yeah, it's more relaxed.
Hmm. Yeah,
So I
and so
don't
you have your foot on the gas pedal. Essentially, you can speed up or slow down everything through the breath.
so I do want to know, like some people that do breath work, they always have it in through the nose and then out through the mouth. Is it better just to keep doing it in through the nose all the time?
So I get this question a lot, is like, how should I be breathing? And the truth is, there's no one perfect breath. I could teach
True.
100+ different styles of breath work,
Mhm.
and really, our breath is designed to be dynamic, because life is also dynamic, right? So we
True.
want to be able to have our internal state match the external environment. So a important process to practice might be, when you walk into a room, or you're going to bed, or you're about to go outside, or you're sitting down for meditation practice, whatever it is consider, how should I be breathing in this environment right now? What is appropriate? Should I stick with the breath that I have, or should I choose to change it? And just paying attention to that really simple awareness is really the key into understanding our subconscious, right? Because the breath is happening subconsciously all the time, and if we can become aware of this, if we can understand ourselves better by understanding the signals that we're sending to our brain, we can really get in touch with who we are as people, the way that we're thinking, the way that we're feeling, the way that we're behaving on a subconscious level.
I like that. I'm really thinking about like the sleep apnea, because I'm like, that's one of the questions that a lot of people ask about, for about hypnosis and sleep apnea. And I'm like, I've known 3 people to die from sleep apnea from either not wearing their machine or just having it, and then they still pass from the sleep apnea. And I'm like, that's one thing I don't mess with, because I'm like, I already know you can die from it because it's bad, depending upon if it's the obstructive, like what I've got, with a little bit of the central, or if it's central sleep apnea. I'm like, I don't mess with that one. But knowing this, I'm like, that'd be worth it. I don't like the CPAP machines.
Totally. Yeah. And you know what? You have the ability to have the CPAP or the respirator. You have a respiratory system within your body. And to outsource that is actually weakening your system, your own ability. I like to think of
Wow.
like anytime that we blame something, we're actually giving a lot of our power away, right?
Well, yes,
It's like
anytime we do, yes.
if and we're so hung up in the Western world on like the solution, the technological solution. And so there's this machine that will, you know, uh, help you breathe when you sleep. And I mean, there's machines for everything now. You can sit in your
True.
bed and you can do your work from your laptop, and you can meet your mate online, and you can order your food, and you don't actually have to move. And a lot of this is, outsourcing things like our movement that nourish us. Our body was designed to move. Our body was designed to breathe. And so when we can actually take responsibility for insourcing this, yeah, it might mean you have to get up and go to the store and pick up some apples, or better yet, go find an apple tree and reach your arms up above your head and, have that little testosterone boost and cortisol drop. Like, it feels good to move your body. It feels good to breathe. And the lazier we get as a Western culture, the more that we're losing our ability to move and breathe and experience, these really big, blissful, safe experiences.
I just got to thinking of this because I remember that's probably why I would get up at like 5, well, about 4 in the morning. I'd always blame it on like rabbits or something in my mom's garden, to go eat like strawberries and stuff. But like we had apple trees, and I'm like, that's probably explains why I liked to pick them before they got the one thing to help get the apples down, for like a pole thing to pull them down. So that would explain that. So then one thing I got to thinking, would that help like the muscles, like so that they wouldn't tear so easily? Because like that's one of the things that I've never broke a bone, but I've torn ligaments in my body.
Hmm.
So would breath work help with that then too, so that we don't, so that our muscles have more of that lacticity, so that they're able
Hmm.
to do better movements?
Absolutely. Yeah. So all that breath is an expansion and contraction of diaphragms, which are thin sheets of muscle, right? And
Yep.
so when we can feel this in the gym, if we're reaching for something, lifting something, hanging from something, swinging from something, rolling. That's why play is so great for us. But really what's happening internally is our breath is expanding our body, right? And
Mhm.
contracting. And so we typically, the lazier that we get, the more contracted we become, right? Because of pressures and
Mhm.
gravity and technology, it's all keeping us quite contracted, and that gives us a smaller capacity within our lungs, right? And as we learn to take fuller, deeper, wider breaths, we're actually expanding deeper down, like we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
We're expanding wider through the rib cage. We're expanding fuller as well, so up even as far into the throat. Our vocal cords are part of our diaphragmatic
Oh
system,
yeah.
that actually, as I'm speaking, you're hearing breath vibrate against my vocal cords right now, which is really interesting to know that we can actually breathe fuller as well, and feel more confident speaking in the world as we feel the ability to open up through the vocal cords, those diaphragms that assist breathing on a much fuller level.
I love this. No wonder why I had more breath, because I was thinking, like, the one day I'm like, why is it seem like when I was playing the flute and in high school and when I was doing singing in choir, it's like, why did it seem like my breath was so much easier? Like I could do things much easier than now, because it's like I can't do it as easy. I thought maybe it's just because of all the kids I kept having, and all the C-sections and that. But this is starting to make more sense to me. Like when I think about when I was in high school doing those activities, is that probably why I had more energy then too? Was more because of the breath work, or that
So
having to do that breath?
yeah, for sure. So breath, metabolizes oxygen into every cell of our body. If we stop breathing, we stop living, right? So
Well,
breath
yeah,
is really our life source. So the fuller, deeper, wider breath that we can take, the more that we're actually able to receive, and the more that we're able to handle. Because when challenging situations come for us in life, we can handle any of them if we pause and breathe first.
true.
But we have to have the ability to, if there's a big challenge, we have to have the ability to take a big breath. And so we can actually directly correlate our lungs capacity to our capacity for life, or our resilience.
I love this. This has just been so much fun and so interesting for like everything you've been talking about. I haven't come across anybody that has explained this breath work part as much
Mhm.
as you have, and I'm extremely grateful for that, because it's like something that I've been questioning and like, well, why is this important? Or you're extremely knowledgeable in this, and I'm like, anybody that can help me get rid of the sleep apnea and have better that, I want that myself. So, what's the best way for our audience to get in touch with you, just in case they do
Mhm.
have sleep apnea? Because I know quite a few people I can hook you up with that could use your service.
Totally. Yeah. So feel.health on Instagram is where I share everything. Feelhealthspa.com is our website. And the other place is our podcast. So the Blissful Movements podcast. So just depending on, whatever modality it is that you prefer to digest information, if you prefer to listen to it or read about it or watch videos, we're kind of on all the platforms there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brady. I really appreciate your time and energy. And for all of our listeners and our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in to Healing for the Soul podcast. I greatly appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Robin. Appreciate your enthusiasm and love for podcasting.
Bye.